Can you please introduce yourself?
My name's Dulude II. I am a makeup designer for Broadway, and I also freelance doing makeup for film and television. I'm also an educator and a fine artist as well.
Can you please tell me about your background? How did you get started?
I always loved makeup as a kid. So I used to watch a lot of old monster movies like Dracula and Frankenstein. And so Halloween was always my favorite holiday. So I would always do some crazy makeup looks on myself for then. And then when I got into college, I was involved in theater and started doing a little bit more makeup in theater. Moved to New York after, and I was working in a punk rock and roll clothing store. And I always had an art background. So that was my background, was graphic design. And I always loved makeup. So when I started working in this store, I would wear makeup on myself, and photographers and stylists would come into the store and ask me if I was a makeup artist. And I would say, yes, I am. And they would say, well, do you want to do some shoot with me for free? And I'll give you pictures. So I said yes. And so I started doing that, and I learned a lot of with photo shoots. And I had already known a lot of lighting because of my theater background. So that was really good. And because of my art background, I was used to painting. So I had that skill as well. And then I eventually got a job working for Mac, and I was a cashier for them for about a year. And then I moved up to third key, and then to assistant manager, and then to manage the pro store. And through that, I did a lot of body painting. So as I went along, I started learning more and more about makeup, and then eventually happened to be in the right place at the right time and started designing for Broadway.
Tell me about your first Broadway job, please.
So the first show I designed was Wicked. I had been working, so I had moved from New York to LA to do more film and television, and to go to school for special effects. And so I was out there working, trying to build up my career out there. I happened to be back in New York working for the Style Network for Fashion Week, so doing some of the makeup on their hosts. And my friend Kate Best called me, and she's Vanessa Williams' makeup artist. And Vanessa was doing Into the Woods at the time, and Kate was doing her makeup, and she needed someone to cover for her for a couple of shows. So I said yes. Well, 2 shows turned into 8 shows. I went back to LA. She called and said, will you come back and do another week? So I came back and I did another week, went back to LA, and then she said, will you come and will you take over for me? I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, yes. So I moved back cross country in the same year because I was working on getting my union out on the West Coast, but it was very slow. And I knew that if I did this, I would get my union pretty much right away because I had done enough of the hours on the East Coast. So I said yes, and moved back, did it. And the costume designer for that is Susan Hilferty. And I knew Susan was going to be doing Wicked, and I had read the book and loved the book. So I just said I would love to work on this, just like I had done Into the Woods, just be the makeup artist on the show. And a month before they left to go to their out of town in San Francisco, I got a call from her office asking if I would come in to interview to design the show. And the director wanted someone who didn't necessarily have a theater background, but more of an editorial background, because he didn't want it to look typical theatrical makeup. And so then I got the job.
What was your work process like? It was your first show, right? And it's such a big show, like Wicked.
Yeah, I mean, but at the time, we didn't know what it was going to be. We didn't know if it was going to be that big, if it was going to be successful. So for me, I had designed fashion shows, and so I was used to being in charge. I was also a manager, so I had that experience. So that didn't bother me, but also this was my first Broadway show. I had never, I had run the show Into the Woods, but it was it wasn't a whole lot of work. But now I would have to come up with the, how it's run. I come up with all the makeup. And so I just sat down over a couple of days, and I had all of the costume sketches. I had all of the headshots of the actors, and I just started creating from that, taking from what they were wearing, sort of creating these sort of characters with makeup. And for the ensemble. For the principals, it was a little bit more specific. So I had done a bunch of tests on using my friends, using different products, see what I liked, see what I didn't like. But also, because the time frame was so small, I had to do it very fast. And
How fast?
well, I got hired about a little less than a month from when we were going to San Francisco to start working. I hadn't met any of the people in it. So I, with the green, I was like trying different things out. We tried airbrushing, and which everyone thinks is what we do because there's one picture of me airbrushing. But the funniest thing was that the first time I met Adina, and I'm doing the first makeup test on her, they decided to film it for a documentary that they were doing about new Broadway shows. And so we were in the rehearsal studio. It was really hot out. There was no air conditioning. I'm doing this for the first time, meeting her for the first time. Everybody is around us, including a camera crew. So we had like directors, producers, costume designer, wig designer, like everybody's in this room watching, and I'm airbrushing, and I hadn't really airbrushed a whole lot at that time. So my skills weren't as good as they are now, but and even now I don't even airbrush all that much. But yeah, it was just, I was sweating because it was hot and I was nervous, and but everybody loved it. But then I sat down with Adina and I said, can we just meet on our own, like without the cameras, without everybody around, because I'm not happy with this. And also, you have to do 8 shows a week. I can't be airbrushing you 8 shows a week. Like at that time, like the technology was different in airbrush and in the product, and like that makeup is going to be flying through the air and you're going to be breathing it in, and you have to sing. So it's not good. Also, it wouldn't be quick to do it. Like if you're airbrushing, natural skin color, it can be really quick to do. But when you're doing a color, you really have to go slow, and you really have to go over it to make sure that it's nice and even all over the skin. I was like, if we have an emergency or, where you're running late, we're never going to be able to get it done on time. So we met separately and then tried this one, what we use now, which is the MAC Landscape Green Chroma Cake, which is like watercolor. And at the time, I didn't use the big Japanese brush like I do now. I just had regular foundation brushes, and I was using that. And but then when I got to San Francisco, I was like, we need something bigger, and went to an art supply store and found these brushes and started using them.
Can you please tell me a bit about your collaboration with the lighting designer and the rest of the team?
Sure. Yeah, one of my favorite things is collaboration on shows, and I love working with the people on the show. So you work very closely with the costume designer because they're basically the person that usually hires you. And so hair and makeup usually fall under costume. They have ideas of what they want, and they give you references, and then you work on your designs. You send it to them. They say yes or no, or they say, let's wait and see what it looks like. And then, so that's the person you work the most closely with. You also work sometimes closely with directors. It just depends on the show. Sometimes directors are really involved with the hair and makeup people. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they just give the notes to the costume designer, and then the costume designer gives you the notes. With Beetlejuice, the director, Alex Timbers, was very, very involved in all aspects of the show. And it was one of the first times that I ever had that kind of relationship with a director where they directly came to me all the time, that we had discussions, that he had ideas and I would have to say, yes, that's going to work, or no, this isn't going to work, and here's why it's not going to work. And it was really great to have that close relationship with it, because I think it shows in the ultimate design of how everything looks in that show. And then lighting is really important too. Lighting designer is very important. On Wicked, Ken Posner and I worked really closely because he wanted to make sure that the green looked good. And we had found a green that worked, that looked really good. But with lighting, he wants to make sure that that green stays looking good. So I would sit through, and he would put different gels on the spotlight to see which one would work the best. And we would go through and sort of look at them and then sort of say, I like this one best, or and so it was a little bit of back and forth. And I've worked with him on many shows, and it's always great to work with him because he is very involved in it, and he really will come up to me a lot of times and say, hey, this isn't looking right. Is there anything that you can do? Or I can go up to him and say, hey, this person's looking a little too something, is there anything that you could do? Can you change it a little bit? And he's very open to that. And you don't always get that with a lot of creatives, but luckily with the people that I've worked with, it's, that's been very good for me.
What do you focus on when you read the script for the very first time?
I hate reading scripts cold, especially musicals. It's so hard to read a musical because it doesn't make sense when you read it, because you're like, I don't know what's happening. And suddenly they burst into a song and you're like, I remember the first time I read Follies, I read through Act 1 and I was like, okay, great, I kind of understand it. And then I read through Act 2 and I was like, I have no clue what just happened. Like, I don't know what this act is. But there's definitely, like, when I read through the script, there's, if there's very specific things that I have to pay attention to, I will. Like, if it says anything about, like, a cut or a bruise or a, dirt or anything like that, I'll take notes on that. But most of what I get comes from the costume designer, and seeing the costume sketches and then talking with them and them saying, okay, and then in Act 2, Scene 3, we need this. And then also when they get their tracking sheet. So for a tracking sheet is for each of the characters, and it shows which character they are in each scene. And also sometimes if they know the timing, they'll put the times for the changes, like when they have quick changes in it. And so that's really important to me. And like for Beetlejuice, that was a huge thing, because the ensemble goes into so many different characters, and it's not like they're just adding a lipstick. Like, they're taking off full makeups, putting on full makeups like 3-4 times during the show. So that's really important to me, because then I have to figure out how to do these changes, which also influences what the design is, because I need to find products or ways that they can easily make these changes in the time that they have.
And the actors usually do their own makeup, right, on Broadway?
Most of the time they do, unless it's specialty makeup. So they're, like Wicked has a makeup person on it. Beetlejuice has a makeup person on it. Phantom of the Opera has one, because there's prosthetics in it. Lion King, of course, has one. So like when there's this big specialty makeup, they will hire a makeup person for it. But most of the time, I will teach the actors what to do, and then they do it on themselves, and then I give them notes, and then we fix things and make things better.
Can you tell me what the sketching out face charts look like?
I use makeup. I actually use actual makeup on the face chart. So I have these faces that I found on the internet. I actually think they're MAC face chart faces. And I just have those. I print them out, and I've set them up in Excel. So I have the face chart on one side, and then on the other side, have a list of everything, like foundation, powder, concealer, eyelid, eyeliner, all that stuff. And then I just sort of go through and start sketching it out with makeup and start creating looks. And if I don't like them, I throw them away. And if I do like them, I don't spend a whole lot of time on them, because from experience, I know that what I put on a two-dimensional white piece of paper isn't going to always necessarily translate on a 3-dimensional person. So there are adjustments that need to be made because of like face shape, eye shape. Sometimes colors react differently, especially if you're working with people with darker skins. The colors that you choose, you may think they're going to look good, but sometimes the colors will just get absorbed into their skin, or they'll turn a little grayish. So you have to be able to adjust. So I don't spend a lot of time on them, making them super pretty and super perfect, because more than likely they're going to change. And so then when I get there, then I can try it out and see. And then if it does work, then great. Then if it looks good, then I'll just keep that one. But if I need to like do another one, I'll do another one. And sometimes product changes, colors change, just depending on once you do it on them. A couple of the shows, it's beautiful. When I started to design it, and I'm like, because it was 1960s. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I have all these great ideas, but I don't know how this makeup's going to look on these people. So I waited until I did my makeup sessions with them, and then I had all the information in my head. So I just tried it out on them and then did it, and then what worked, and then did the face charts after. And the same thing with Sunday in the Park with George. Clint Ramos, the costume designer, wanted more of an editorial, soft look for it, like washes of color, kind of like, the little speckles of the Seurat painting. And which was so much fun because I never get to do that kind of makeup for theater. But it was the same thing. I couldn't do designs beforehand because each person was individual. So I had to sit with each person and look at what their costume was, look at what their face was, and then come up with a design accordingly for that, because there was no way to do that beforehand. It would have never worked. Because, some things may look good on some people and some things may not, if you have a younger person or an older person, or, it's hard to do that. And I think people don't always understand that, and producers and company management doesn't always understand that, part of the design with makeup is it needs to be adjusted for each person. You can't just give someone a design and say, here you go, do it. You need to be able to look at it on them and say, okay, I need to bring the shadow out more because their faces, their eyes are looking too close together, or this person has a rounder face, so I need to put a little bit more contour on them, or this red color that I use isn't working on their lips, so let me find something else. And, a lot of times productions will try to just, especially if it's future productions of a show, sometimes they'll try to just do that. And instead of bringing in the designer, they'll just be like, oh, just give us the face charts, we'll do it. And when I did Beautiful London, the department didn't know that I was coming out. So they had gone out and they looked at pictures and of the makeup, and went out and got all of this makeup that they thought looked like the pictures. And it was all the wrong makeup. And then I came in and they were like, no one told us you were coming in. So then we had to redo a lot of the makeup. And, I was able to make some of the stuff that they had gotten work. But that's, again, you can't look at a picture and say, unless it specifically says this is Russian red lipstick from MAC, like you can't just look at it and be like, oh, this is this one.
How much time do you usually have to design a makeup for the show?
It depends. I've had anywhere from like 6 months to do it to a couple of weeks. So it just depends on the show. Sometimes they ask last minute because they can't get anybody, or they haven't thought about it, which always makes me laugh when they say, well, we didn't even think about makeup. Like, how could you not think about makeup? It's part of the whole entire show. But I've done shows that have, literally gone in, got hired the week before and did some stuff, like sketched some things out at home, and then, went in and did it. So, it's really random. So it's one of those things where you have to be able to work quickly, but, I always work better at the last minute. So even if I have 6 months to prepare, I probably will wait till like a month before, at least, before I start doing anything. Because you change your mind and things change, and then you get more information, or as they're rehearsing, they're like, oh, we've decided this person's going to be this and not this. So all of this stuff that you might have done might have been wasted. And I work well quickly because my background was in doing fashion shows. And so I was used back then. There weren't a lot of makeup artists on the team, so you would have to do model after model after model after model and just be really quick about it. And so it got me into that position of being able to do things very quickly.
What was your most challenging production and why?
Beetlejuice was my most challenging, I think. One of my favorites, but it was probably the hardest that I did because we did have people getting in and out of makeups, 3 and 4 times during the show, like full makeup. So not just like, oh, well, we're going to add something on this, and having to teach them as well, and not simple makeups, not just a normal makeup, like going from being a mourner at a funeral and then being like a demon cheerleader with prosthetic ears and then taking that off and being a Beetlejuice clone and then taking that off and being like a dead person in the netherworld and taking that off and going back to your normal. So it was really, really challenging because the Alex Timbers, the director, really wanted to go there with everything. He wanted it full out. And I think the most challenging was when they decided between Washington, D.C. and New York, they changed the Netherworld scene to give Miss Argentina a big musical number. Whereas in D.C., Miss Argentina was just someone in the back, that sort of came out. She didn't really have any lines or anything, but they decided to make her focus in the Netherworld. And they decided that they wanted Leslie Kritzer, who plays Delia, to play Miss Argentina. And they were like, she has 4 minutes to get into this. Now Miss Argentina is all green. So they're like, well, maybe we don't have to make her green. I was like, we have to make her green. Like, she is green. Like, there's no alternative to that. People would be really disappointed if she came out and she wasn't green. So I didn't know how I was going to do it, but we had a test and we sat down and I had my associate and the makeup artist on the show there. And I was like, okay, ready? Hit the timer now. And I started doing stuff. And then I would be like, okay, stop. And then I would stop so that I could think for like a few seconds about what I needed to do next. And then I'd be like, okay, go. And then they would hit the timer again and we'd go. And on the first time, I managed to get her all done in 4 minutes, but under 4 minutes. But that's also me. So I wouldn't be the one doing it. So Leslie would be doing it. And Leanne, who's my makeup person on Beetlejuice, would be doing it. So then it was like, okay, well, we can do this, but this is going to take time. So let's figure out a system. And so we figured out she could do some stuff in the scene before because she would come out with big goggles on. So we asked if she could just keep the goggles on and then she could do the makeup around her eyes. And then she goes off and then she gets into the rest of it. And then they worked out a system between the two of them backstage about, who does what and all of that. So. Yeah, so that was probably the most difficult because it was just trying to figure out how everybody's going to be all of these different characters.
Yeah, I read an article about it on Playbill. It was fascinating to see all the pictures and
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, but I love it and I'm super proud of it. I'm sad that they have to vacate the theater now, which we just found out. But I think it has such a huge fan base that I don't think it's going to be the end of it. I think that it's going to continue, just probably hopefully at a different theater. So we'll see. But it's such a fun show.
Let's talk about finding things on Google. For example, how do you find pictures of 1920s makeup and not the modern people's interpretation of that period?
Well, I've learned over the years how to search on Google. So, because when you do search 1920s makeup, you do get all modern interpretations of it. So when I'm teaching period makeup, what I say to my students is that you can start with 1920s makeup and look, but then, then maybe you find a specific movie star from that era and you start searching for that, or you search for 1920s, female, like actresses, 1920s actresses, and then you start finding real pictures of what people look like during that time. And then you can start to look at specific people that you either like the look of or want to emulate. But then also like reading articles and reading history. So like to know the history of what the makeup was at the time, what people were using, how it was formulated, why people were using it is really important as well, because it gives you more of an idea of what it was. So like say for the 1920s, it was like a rebellion because women were forced before that to wear clothing that covered almost every inch of their body, you know, collars that came up to here. They had to have long hair, but they had to put their long hair up. And then they couldn't really wear any makeup, and because that was a sign of prostitution, they had to be all corseted in and have the tiniest waist and wear all these layers. And so when they got to the 1920s, it was like this freedom for women. And so they started wearing trousers and they started wearing short, you know, dresses and more things that were looser because they had been so constricted for so long. They cut their hair short because they've had to have long hair. So knowing that too makes you understand why the makeup is the way that it is. So it makes you understand how to do the makeup as well. And I think that's really important. I always try to like then find like little keywords. Like if I just want to find like alien makeup, you know, if I put alien makeup on, I'll get a lot of things, but a lot of times it's prosthetics, you know, if I'm trying to do something without prosthetics, I need, you know, it's great to be inspired by that. But again, you see an image, and then sometimes if you click on that image and you click onto that website, sometimes you get information that then you can be like, oh, I didn't even think about this. And you start rewording how you search for things and using different words to search for it, and you get different images.
What were the challenges of presenting the undersea world on stage without water in the Spongebob?
When I got asked to do Spongebob, David Zinn, who's the costume and set designer, gave me these words as inspiration. Like this was what he was going for. He said, 80s, 90s, East Village, Burning Man, early B-52s. So that was what my reference to go from. But you'd think that would be easy to find reference pictures, but it's really not. It was a little difficult to find some of the reference for this. And I was having a really, really hard time with it. There were some characters, like the main characters like SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy. We had agreed that they were going to be the most normal, that they shouldn't be distracting with their makeup. So we wanted them just to look normal like people. You know, but like Patrick has pink eyebrows. You know, SpongeBob has a little bit of like pink on his cheeks, and you know, and like mascara to sort of like give that like big eye and that sort of SpongeBob-y look, but without going far. But then everybody else, Mrs. Puff and the mayor were good from the beginning. I had a very clear idea of what I wanted for them, and David always liked them, so that was very specific. But the rest of the cast I designed 3 times. I couldn't get exactly what he wanted, and I was trying, and I was, you know, a lot of Burning Man pictures, it's like a lot of glitter and, you know, stuff like that, and I'm like, we're not doing glitter, that's for sure. And because they were not only the characters in Bikini Bottom, but also these sort of generic undersea people at certain points, they couldn't be too far because they needed to look okay, you know, in the other outfits and wigs, and then also look like their character when they were their character. So I designed it. He didn't like it. I went back. I started researching like all of the like undersea creatures that they were. I started pulling colors of those undersea creatures in. Maybe if they had patterning, I started doing patterning. And then I showed that to him, and he was like, no, that's not working. That's not working. And he said something to me, and I wish I could remember what it was, but I don't. But he said something, and I said, oh, like me and my friends when I first moved to New York. And so I started designing them like I would do makeup on myself, and like my friends did makeup in the late 90s when I first moved to New York. And that was it. And I realized it was very like colorful, you know, blocks of color, kind of blended, you know, looking kind of 80s, kind of 90s, ravey. So yeah, and that's what it was. And it wasn't about copying these undersea creatures, but creating a whole new world of them. these characters and recreating these characters, you know. And it's kind of cool when you see, I think they just, in the cartoon, they just changed the mayor's look to look like the musical, which I think is really cool. And it's really fun also to see, like with Beetlejuice, like now people who are doing cosplay for Beetlejuice are doing the look that we did, or any of the characters, they're doing the look that we did rather than the look from the movie. And that's kind of cool to see when people are doing that.
What's, in your opinion, the most common misconception about being a makeup designer?
There's a lot of misconceptions. One, that it's an easy job. Two, that it's a glamorous job. You know, on my social media, I don't post, you know, negative things, you know, and I don't post every single second of my life. So I post things that I want to post and things that I think they're important. So, you know, and things that I do, and I do live a really incredible life because I've made that life for myself. And I don't, you know, I don't sort of restrict myself like on things. But at the same time, people think I make a lot of money. They think I'm, you know, like super wealthy, which is not true at all. There are months when I go with no work. That's the problem of being a freelancer. And so there are times when I have very little money and barely make enough to survive. And then there are times that I have a lot of money, you know, because I get a lot of jobs all of a sudden. So I think that they think, one, that it's a really glamorous lifestyle, and they don't realize that you really have to work hard at it. And they also think it's easy. And I found this in a lot of shows where, you know, especially because makeup is makeup designers are a new thing in theater. You know, they never used to have makeup designers. It was just the costume designer would say to the actor, you do this, or the actor would just do a generic, you know, generic theatrical makeup design on themselves. So it's a new thing. So a lot of these older producers don't see it as a design element, and they feel that it just sort of happens. And when you're good at what you do, then it seems like it just happens because you know what to do. You can bypass any problems because you've dealt with it in the past. And so the makeup goes up there, the people look great. They don't understand the work that goes into it, the research that goes into it, the experience that goes into it as well. You know, you get someone who's never done theater before to go into a show, to design it. They don't understand, you know, necessarily speed. You know, they don't understand how it's going to read on stage. They don't understand, you know, this person has to wear this 8 times a week. Like, you have to really watch out for their skin. So like for Beetlejuice, I made sure that we provided them with the best skincare that we could, because they're taking off makeup, putting it on, taking off, putting it on, taking it off, putting it on. That's going to wear on their skin, you know, over a week. So we need to make sure that they have the proper things. And so there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and, you know, and making sure that it's going to look right and look appropriate and work with the costumes, work with the hair, you know, work with the lighting. And so I think that people think it's just an easy job where, like, oh, you just throw some stuff on their face and then they're good to go. But it's more than that. You know, it's knowing color theory. It's knowing how the colors are going to change. If you have someone of a different skin color or a different, you know, age, like, how's that going to read on them? Someone who's 80, you have to think about how you know, what your makeup design is, as opposed to someone who's 20. You know, it's a much different type of makeup design. So there's a lot of work and a lot of thought that goes into it. And I think that a lot of times people just don't understand that work because they just see the end result and think it's easy.
Can you share any makeup horror stories of the things that went wrong?
I don't have horror stories. I mean, they're definitely learning experiences. When we did Jekyll and Hyde, it was a Victorian steampunk version. So it was a lot of makeup and a lot of dark makeup. And I did this thing where I had like each of the ensemble women had like a very specific color that they had. So they would have this bright color, but then this really dark eyes. And we did them, and I just, did them normal, kind of a little winged out. And then they got up on stage, and all of them looked like they were cross-eyed. Like all of their eyes looked like they were this close together because it was so dark that it was bringing their eyes close together. So I had to but it was just a funny thing to see where everybody came out. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And then on Beautiful, we had a lot of lighter skinned Black girls who were playing like the Shirelles and, girl groups and things like that. And in the 60s, if you look at the reference pictures, like a lot of these groups didn't even wear a whole lot of makeup. It was black eyeliner, like crazy black eyeliner, and then like a light lip. So obviously we gave them a little bit more makeup than that. But what happened was, with the light lip, when they went on stage, they didn't look like they had any lips because the lips were just blending right into their skin color. Even though they weren't the same, like the lips were much lighter than their skin color, but it didn't show on stage under the lights. So what I ended up having to do is what I like to call chola lips. So I had to have them either do a dark brown or a dark purple liner, like a hard one right around the lips. And then when they did that on stage, it just framed their lips. So then you could see the light lips, but it didn't look like they were wearing like a dark liner. But then I also had to say to them, when you do a public appearance, you don't do that. Like if you're going for television, you obviously don't put that liner on. I said, this is only for stage. So but I think haven't been horror things. In Wicked, I had hired myself to be the makeup artist for Wicked when we first started. So I did Broadway for a little over a year. I did the tour for 4 years, and I did San Francisco for 2. And I went out and designed other things in that time period, took time off and did that. But when on the tour, every time we had a new Elphaba standby, they went on in the middle of the show. And so we would have to get them ready very, very quickly. And so my record for getting an Elphaba ready is 7 minutes. Because it was just, and you just have to do it like as fast as you can. We also had to do that with Amorable once, which is really funny because the Madame Morrible makeup is much more like Elphaba. You can get away with it because it's pretty much a simple beauty makeup, but with Morrible, it's very specific. And it's also, getting that color onto her face. And so that was really interesting to have to put someone in the middle of the show, and just all of us, everybody's there, wardrobe, hair, makeup, we're all there trying to do everything at the same time, wigs going on and costumes going on while you're trying to do stuff. And yeah, so we've had some really interesting experiences, but nothing that was ever a horror story though.
You probably know Romano Dinilla if you worked on tour for so long.
Who? Oh, Romano. Yeah.
I just interviewed him recently.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's great.
I was wondering, what is it like to work on tour for so long and, constantly travel?
So when I first started tour, I really loved it. It gave me the opportunity to explore the country and also Canada, because we went up to Canada. Going to places that I never would have gone on my own because there weren't places that I really thought about going, but ended up loving. So I got to see a lot of the country. It was really great. If you do it correctly, you can make a lot of money because you get per diem on the road as well. So if you decide you want to stay someplace else that maybe is a little cheaper than what the company provides, then you can save up money. There's, really great things. You get to explore different places. So it was really fun. But then after a while, it does start to wear on you because you never have a permanent home. So, when you're sick or, not feeling so great, you don't feel as comfortable when you go back to where you're staying because it doesn't feel like a home. So you're always constantly packing up and moving. And the first 2 years I traveled with the company, flew with them and all that. But then I bought a car And then I started driving, and that was a lot better because then, even though some of the drives were very long, I was on my own time schedule, and then it also allowed me to like take side trips and go places in between cities so I could explore. And that was really fun. But yeah, so it has its good and its bad. But I think after 4 years, I was done. It was time for me to get off tour. I have known people that have, done tour for 10 years. But it does start to wear on you after a while because you feel like you have no foundation, no base. You have your friends on tour, but people come and go on tour all the time. So you could become very good friends with someone and become very close with them, and then they give their notice and then they're gone, and then you're without them. So it's like a weird situation where you're very, very close because you're, doing this and traveling together. But then at the same time, then people just disappear and go off to do other things, and you're still there, stuck there. So
how do you prevent and deal with burnout?
Holidays, making sure you take time off. I encourage my makeup artists that are on my shows to take the time off that they need. So if they need to take 3 weeks off, I mean, obviously you only get a certain amount of weeks paid vacation, but if they need to take a month off, I let them take a month off. I'm all for that because it's the only way to keep going, because when you're doing the same thing day after day after day after day, and the repetitive motion day after day after day, it can wear on your body and it can wear on your mind. So I think it's really important to take the time off that you need to, and to treat yourself, which is what I've done in my life too, is like I treat myself. So if I want to go have a really nice dinner one night, I'm going to go do that. Whether I have a ton of money in my account or whether I have no money in my account. Obviously I have to, if I don't have any money in my account, I can't do it. But I make sure that I do these things because they're important to me. They're important for me to be able to function. I used to think it was through buying things, because I came from a simple background. We didn't want for anything, but we also didn't have money in my family. So when I suddenly started making all this money, I was so excited, and I started eating at all the fanciest restaurants, and I started buying all this designer clothes and spending all this money, and then realizing that didn't make me happy at all. It was a temporary, I mean, I still love to eat at really nice restaurants because I love food. So I'll still do that, but buying all of these things made me realize they didn't do anything for me. And it was more about experiences and about, living my life and being able to do the things that I wanted to do, to be around my friends. This is why I live where I live. I live in Western Massachusetts, even though most of my work is either down in New York or the film and TV work is out in the Boston area, which is about 2 hours from me. And, but where I live is amazing and it's beautiful. And I found a great family out here of performers and artists, and we get to do things. We get to do shows. We get to, do art. And so it's worth it for me to be out here and then have to travel to go do the work and deal with that so that I can have a life that I actually enjoy. And I think a lot of times people forget is in this industry, especially all aspects of the makeup artist industry, is that they get so involved and so consumed by the work that they don't take the time for themselves. And then what's the point? Why are you working so hard to not enjoy it? So, but there's that fear when you're freelancing that if you say no, people aren't going to ask you again. And which is a true fear, but, but at the same time, you have to be able to, say no and take time to do what you want to do. You know, I thought I would want to work on a TV show full time or a film full time. And I wouldn't mind doing maybe one a year, but I look and I've worked on them and I've day played on them and I enjoy it. I love going in, doing the background people and just like going in, doing my job, coming home. But I look at these people that are on it and, you know, we do 12, 14-hour days sometimes. And then the next day you're back and doing 12 and 14-hour days and you do that 5 days a week. And I'm like, that's not the life I want to live. Like, yes, I'd be making a lot of money. It's great. I have my insurance. Like, it's all wonderful. But what kind of life is that? You know, that isn't what I want out of life. And so I've learned how to adjust my life to be able to have it be something that I enjoy and love.
Is it what you expected when you were just starting out?
No, I don't even know if I knew what I expected starting out. I kind of fell into it and it was all like overwhelming at first. And sometimes I look back and I still, it seems very surreal to me. You know, I think about when I was younger and, you know, having like pictures of people up on my wall of like celebrities or, you know, TV stars, movie stars, watching people in movies and like loving the movies and being obsessed with the movies. And then years later, working with these people and becoming friends with these people. And so you look back at it, it's very surreal. And, you know, and I have had a really great career and a really great life. And I really enjoy what I've done most of the time. You know, but it still, it just doesn't always seem real, you know, and when I'm talking to like other makeup artists or, you know, giving a talk in front of people, you know, I tell them like, I'm not any better than you are. I said, I have more experience than you. It doesn't make me a better person. And I don't treat you as less than what I am. Like we're all treated the same, no matter where you are in your career. It's just experience that makes us different. I was like, but if you treat people well and kindly, which is not always, doesn't always happen in our industry, you know, that's the most important. And that's sort of what I've based my work on is, you know, I treat everybody kind. You know, I don't have drama. Like if something is, you know, happens that needs to be fixed, I fixed it. You know, I don't make a big deal out of it. You know, I'm very calm and I have like a really calm energy. And I think that's also what people really enjoy about me is that they know that if they hire me, the job will get done. And also there's not going to be any problems. There's not going to be any drama. And I'm going to take care of what I need to take care of, you know, and be nice about it. And I think that's really important too for makeup artists is like, you're not fabulous. Just because you work with someone fabulous doesn't mean that you're fabulous. You know, you're doing a job. That's a job. And I think a lot of people also confuse that, especially with celebrity and with where we are now in society with social media and people becoming celebrities just from being on social media. You know, there's this false sense of you're better. And, you know, you don't have to treat people nicely because either you're working with someone who doesn't treat people nicely, and so you're learning that behavior from them, or you just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do because now I'm famous. So now I can leave all these people behind and hobnob with all these like fancy people and be someone fabulous. But, you know, all those people that you left behind are the real people that would truly stand by you, you know, and you don't always get that, you know, when you're with celebrities, you know, they can decide to change you in a moment's notice because they want something different or their agent tells them or their manager tells them they need to go for something different or they need to use this person or that person. And, you know, and it's an interesting thing because people coming in think it's this like wonderful, fabulous, glamorous life, but it's also a lot of work.
Is there anything you would like to talk about?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think I kind of went over everything. The only other thing I would say is, if you really want to consider a career in makeup, take art classes. Because art, it will teach you about color theory. It will teach you about light and dark. It teaches you about contour and highlight. You learn about the body and the muscle structure and the skeletal structure, which is so important in makeup because you're creating contour and highlight according to that. So if you need to adjust or change or give someone a stronger contour, where it needs to go. So I think that's really important. Color theory is a huge, huge thing. I mean, no one used to teach color theory in makeup. Now everybody teaches it, which is great. But before, no one ever taught color theory, and it's so important to know in all aspects because of lighting, because of skin tone, what colors work together, what will happen if you put complementary colors near each other, like, how do you create excitement with makeup and with color? And if you don't know color theory, that makes it really difficult.
Are there any internships for makeup artists on Broadway?
No, there are not. I've had some shows where I've been able to bring people in for like a day to sort of watch and see what I do. I've done that in London as well, but they don't really do internships for theater, because it's also union. So there's a lot of union rules as well. Like certain houses will have specific rules where if you're not union, you can't be on the stage, or you can't do this, you can't do that. I have done it where, I've had like up and coming makeup artists, and I'll ask my makeup artist on Wicked, like, can they just watch you for a show? And if it works out and everybody's comfortable with it, if the person playing Elphaba is comfortable with it, company management is, then they've been able to do that. But there's no like specific like internship that you can do, sadly. And then in order to work on Broadway, you have to be in the union. So.
And how do you join the union? What are the requirements?
You have to make days. I should know this, but I don't want to say the wrong things, but in the US, you can always contact the union or go to their website, and it'll tell you everything that, all the hours that you need to make, how much it'll cost once you make those hours. But then also you have to apply, and you would fill out your application. You have to have a portfolio. It gets reviewed, and then if they think that you should be in the union, then you get asked to be in, and then you pay your amount. Sometimes if you've worked, there's a lot of times where there are so many projects going on that there aren't enough union artists available. So sometimes if you're non-union, it's a really good time for you, because then they have to use non-union people, but then that counts towards your union. So you start to get your hours for it. So like one of my associates, Valeria, she wasn't union, but all the work that she did for me counted towards the union. So she was able to get her hours, and now she's in the union. But while she was being my associate, because as a designer, you don't have to be in the union, even though I am. But she wasn't. And so now she is, which is great for her. But yeah, so it's a lot harder to do now than it used to be, but I think that's good because they're, sort of regulating who's coming in a little bit more. And I think the people that they're bringing in are really great and going to move the union forward. And I'm very happy to be in the union. I'm very happy if I can, get my hours in with my freelancing and day playing, like to be able to get my union insurance, because it's really good. So, and they've done some really great things, over the years for me. So.
And the last question.
Mm-hmm.
How often do you visit the show once it's up and running? And what's the main difference between working in the West End and on Broadway?
It depends on the show. So like with Wicked, I try to go once a year to all the different companies to check on them. So what Broadway, the U.S. tour, and London. But other shows, a lot of times they don't, they don't ask for you to go back out unless there's like, like with Beautiful, I had the situation where the woman who was playing Carole King had a very different eye shape, and they were having a really, really hard time figuring out what to do for her. And so they asked me to come in and, work with her. And so I've done that. So sometimes they'll specifically ask me, but most of the shows will not ask me to go back in. Sometimes I will. Sometimes with social media, I will see things that people post and I'll be like, oh, that is awful. And then I'll contact my makeup person and be like, you need to have them fix that. I was like, that's what happens when you're on social media. So usually like with Wicked, it's once a year. And I'm sure Beetlejuice probably would have been, I could have said, I want to come in and check on it. And they would have been cool with it. But the difference between the US and the West End, it's interesting because when I first set up Wicked in London, it was a much different work ethic. Like in the US, we're used to like go, get everything done as quick as possible. And in the West End, it was much more laid back and much more relaxed. And it was tough to get used to that because I was so used to being like asking for something to be done and having it done. Whereas asking for something to be done and 3 days later, it's still not done. So it was tough. It was tough to get used to that. And now I think things have changed a lot since then. And, I go over once a year and I check on the show. And then I sit down with all of the hair and makeup people because their union, they're both hair and makeup, and they all do both jobs, and they switch off too. So it's not like one person doing one character all week. They switch off throughout the week. And so I sit down with them and I do a lesson with them. So we go through all of the characters. They have the understudies come in. I do the makeup on all the characters. I talk about why the makeup is the way that it is. And they really love that because also their staff changes so much. And so and it's rare that you come into a show and have access to the designer showing you exactly what needs to be done and telling you, hey, you have the freedom to do this. Like, you're a makeup artist. You're not going to do it exactly the same way that I am. Trust yourself, trust your skills. If you think something's wrong, fix it. And a lot of times they're not given that. So I think they appreciate it, and it also then makes it work differently.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. This was great.
Thank you. It meant the world to me.